true, so thank you, Jeff. Okay, so I'll kick this off and get us started. Hopefully we can give you in this 75 minutes some information that will help get you excited and moving forward with Configuration Manager and helping you move forward with virtual applications and virtual settings. Our goals in this session are to really help you understand how Config Manager integrates and allows you to simplify management and deployment of applications and settings, and specifically AppV and UEV in this instance. And we'll give you an understanding of how AppV works, how UEV works, and how MDOP is really that vehicle that enables that. So hopefully that's what you're here for, because that's what we're going to focus on. And ideally, each of you will walk out and understand how you can take this knowledge back and start implementing it in your organizations to hopefully make a big difference in how you look at the enterprise and deliver on the vision of user-centric computing. So with that, let's just talk briefly about some of the technologies we're going to cover. Hopefully all of you are moving towards or are at System Center Configuration Manager 2012. Just out of curiosity, how many have actually deployed System Center 2012? That's fantastic. I got to tell you, that's so exciting. I'm excited to see how quickly people are adopting and moving it. And it makes a huge difference in what you do. I think it's truly one of the better technologies we've rolled out. But what's interesting about this is there's really 4 areas that really make a big difference. The first one is application delivery. And this is where it focuses on user-centric computing. This is new in 2012 that allows you to identify the users and what applications they should have. And when we talk about virtual applications and settings, this plays a key role because it really is about the user, not how your network is necessarily configured. The network can figure that stuff out and you can deliver value to the end user. The next one is desktop virtualization. And when you think about the tools that are available in 2012, now you can actually manage across multiple desktops, whether they're physical or virtual, deliver and manage applications like AppV much more efficiently, and really deliver high value in that environment. Next one is device management. When you marry this with Windows Intune, you're able to manage across multiple devices now, not just the traditional Windows desktop. So there's added value with that. And then finally, security, where I'm able to now maintain the endpoint protection and the systems that I need to make sure that that environment is truly secure and up and running in the way that I expect it to and meeting the standards of my environment. Now, the next one is really MDOP. And when we talk about MDOP, it's key to understand that it is a product that typically people look at and maybe have 1 or 2 technologies they've implemented. And this is what we want to change. There's a lot of great things in MDOP. Now, the requirement is you need to have software assurance, and then you can purchase MDOP. Now, with that, you have some great opportunities and things you can use. So first off, I want to talk about the virtualization pillar. And this is where we're going to focus today on our technologies. Things like AppV, where I have virtual applications, where I can take these and get some added value, and we'll drill into what that is. User experience virtualization, to take my settings and move those between devices. And MEDV, which allows me to take legacy applications running in Windows XP and allow those to move forward and run under Windows 7. Manage allows us to use tools like AGPM, Advanced Group Policy Management. So I can now version and control the group policies that are being managed and rolled out across my enterprise and control and manage how those are effectively deployed and used. Microsoft BitLocker administration and monitoring. If you're talking about securing the data on a device, BitLocker is a tremendous technology that's part of Windows now. But with MBAM, I now have the ability to manage it in an enterprise scenario. So I can take and control the policies. I can manage how that's going to interact on the desktops and make that available to my users. And what's really great about this tool is now with MBAM, if I had a machine that's lost, I can tell you if it was encrypted, and I can determine my risk if I did lose data, if indeed that was secured or not. So that's a big deal when you talk about today's modern world and how things work. And finally, DART, which is Microsoft's Diagnostic and Recovery Toolkit. And for those times when you have a system that is corrupted or you're having access issues or you need to support users in unique ways, DART has a number of tools in its tool set that you can leverage and use. So again, when we're talking MDOP, these are the suite of tools that you can leverage. We're going to focus again on that first pillar. Just one quick advertisement on this. Those of you that may have come in later, we have a survey if you're an MDOP customer that you can take on that table. Don't do it now during the presentation. You can take it and bring it to the booth at some time. But those of you that have taken one, you can leave them on the table on the way out, or again, take them to the MDOT booth. All right, with that, let's talk about some of the technologies. First, what is application virtualization? I talked to a couple of people as they came in, and they're really new to this. So we'll give you just a quick 2-minute overview. So first definition, love this line, creates virtual applications. Okay, well, what does that mean? Very simple. Applications are sequenced. And what that means is I'm able to take an application and take it from what was a physical app where it goes and interacts and looks for libraries and files and touches the registry and does all those things on my desktop, to where it can transform into a virtual application where it creates literally a virtual bubble or silo, if you will, that is overlaid on the system but doesn't replace or touch anything on that system. That's pretty cool. And what that means is this makes it super easy to install and remove these applications. So what happens is when I go and put that application on a machine, rather than it running all the dependencies of the install, checking into those things, it basically looks to see if the app agent is there, and then the app agent manages it and registers it, and that's all it does. It manages the control and interaction with the system. So if you think about how you used to manage applications and have to deal with them, there are some real challenges as you looked at how these all overlaid and interlaced, and if I install this, it may break that, and I've got to retest the whole desktop to roll something out. Those problems can go away as you look at how you manage virtual applications. Now, the benefits of this are really, number one, app isolation. And this is where you're able to go in and enable multiple versions that can coexist, prevent conflicts, and basically make it a lot easier if I'm rolling out an application, those dependency issues go away. That's pretty powerful when you think about the vision of what a virtual application can do in your environment. But there's other things that are really cool as well. As I think of how I deploy an application, suddenly some of those dependencies of when I roll it out go away because I don't have any reboots anymore. It just goes down, gets the application there, and it can show up. And you'll hear us use the term streaming as another option, right? And if you want to get an application out, rather than to have to run through that whole install, you can literally put a shortcut there and have it stream to them, and it'll be like it was installed when it really hasn't been, and they get immediate value and interaction. And the other big one is if you're looking at how to roll out your Windows environments and looking at the size of these images, the footprint is greatly reduced because these can be streamed and pulled down on demand as needed, because you know that the interaction, you can actually limit it, you can control it, and manage how it goes. It makes it a very cool way to roll out this across your enterprise. Now, what about settings? This is where Microsoft User Experience Virtualization comes in, and this is really where we take a look at the user's experience that they're having on any given device and allow that to roam between other devices, leveraging existing management tools to do that. That's pretty cool. And if you think about yourselves, this is your rhetorical question just to think about. How many devices do you have? I bet many of you have already bought a Surface this week, right, at those great prices. So there's a second device, but how many do you have in your office? IT folks are usually probably the worst offenders of this, where we have 2, 3, 4 devices that we're testing and working on. But how do I maintain that consistent experience between those devices? UEV is a way you can do that. Now, what it does is it defines settings templates that actually tell us which settings we should roam. These setting templates go on each machine, and if that template is there, we know that we're going to capture those settings and roam them up to a central location. Now, we've defined some for you in the box, but if there are ones that you need, that you may have those special applications across your enterprise that you want, great. We give you a tool called UEV Generator to go out and to build your own and provide that for you. Now, the benefits of this is it preserves that user experience wherever they go, whether the desktop is physical or virtual. That's pretty cool. So if you have a VDI set up and you have your laptop that you're rolling between, you can have that same experience between those two devices. If the application is physical or virtual, so if you're using AppV on one machine and a physical install on the other, you can do that. We don't really care. The settings will roam between those. It makes it very simple and easy to use. And finally, again, we provide inbox templates. A couple of the big ones that we've worked with our customers on are Office 2007 and 2010. Those are big opportunities and big apps that it's really nice to have those set. And when you talk about the pane of settings, it's not that everybody wants every setting ever made. And that's when we've kind of talked to customers. They said, when I do roaming profiles, it almost brings too much. It's slowing down my logins and all those things. UEV does it very granularly and surgically, that you define the templates of which apps settings are important to you. So if you have somebody that works in a particular group that has customized all their settings in Word and Excel and they have all those things just right, guess what? That's a huge cost to them if they roam to a second machine and have to go through and do it again. Let UEV do that heavy lifting and provide that experience. And then again, IT pros can create their own custom apps if they need. And it's easily deployed because it's a client-based architecture. There's no server component. You're able to simply take this and go ahead and roll it out across your enterprise, point it to an SMB share, and you can go ahead and roll settings. Okay? And of course, the management, PowerShell, Configuration Manager, and Group Policy are all supported. And what you'll see today is how we can leverage Configuration Manager to do that specifically. So, what's our scenario we're going to run through today? We have a guy named Art. And Art is in the art department. I think that's where we came up with his name. And Art is going to a conference. Now, what he needs is an application to do this. So the application, and this is what we came up with for our quick scenario demo, is PowerPoint Viewer. He needs to get in there to see that. Now, we need a way to roll that out, but when you're rolling out things like this, you're thinking of dependencies, how it's going to break the desktop and things. So we're going to use virtual applications to actually manage this. The other thing that Art wants is he wants to be able to see his application settings wherever they are as he roams between devices. So he's going to be using a visual blend that he is going to be using between devices and needs to make sure those settings roam. So we're going to actually show you how that can work. Now, flip over to the administrator, and this is probably where a lot of the people in this room sit. Great, you get a call from help desk, somebody needs a special tool, not exactly how you want to spend your day, so you need a way to do this quickly and easily. So in this scenario, the administrator wants to be able to leverage existing tools without breaking the configurations of those. They also want to ensure that it complies against the existing policies so it can be supported by somebody other than them on that escalated call and issue. So this is really where we talk about the value of Configuration Manager and MDOT coming together to deliver that solution and that real value. Now, what's our setup? We're going to show you today several virtual machines we've got running, and on the server we're running Server 2012. On the client, obviously Windows 8 domain client. And everything in blue is the Configuration Manager components we're going to be running. Okay, so this gives you kind of an idea of how that's configured and set up. Then as we layer on the next portion, this is what we're running with AppV. We do have the client and the sequencer, and then we're actually going to be running the client over on the server as well. Okay, and there is a server component to AppV. We're not going to go into that. We're not doing AppV administration. You can choose to use that or not with Configuration Manager. You can roll it out with just the client components, and that's what we're doing here. If you want to go more in depth with that on AppV, I encourage you to talk to the folks down at the booth, or again, there's several sessions I'll show you at the end that you can go and watch those. Finally, the last piece in green is the UEV components that we're rolling out, and this will actually show you, again, how this layers in and ties into the enterprise as well. All right, so what's our scenarios as we look at this? We've talked about Art. So the demo we're going to do today is first we're going to configure the client, and we're going to start by enabling folder redirection. And this enables us to have our data available wherever we go. Then we're going to create and deploy virtual applications. And you can see this is where we're going to sequence and actually do the deployment. Then finally we're going to wind up by actually creating and deploying the virtual settings. This will be using the generator, create a custom template, and then actually showing how those roam. So with that, I'm going to start by going to configuring the client and turn it over to my friend Jeff.
All right. I get to work now.
Okay, you thought you got to work, but I've got one slide to give real quick.
Oh.
Can I slip back for just 2 seconds?
Sure.
We'll give a quick introduction on this. So folder redirection, why do we do it? This is actually for data. We're going to move data between the devices. So as Art moves between his devices on his network, he wants to have a seamless experience. Folder redirection is a great way to do that. And we've actually done a really cool thing in Config Manager 2012. We've given you a native way to enable that now in Windows 8 using Configuration Manager. All the compliance settings and properties are there. It's actually a configuration item that's placed in. You just go ahead and use it, apply it to a baseline, and you've got it. And it really makes it super easy. Single set of data deployed to user collections, and you're off and running. And with that, may I turn the time to you now? Okay, there we go.
Thank you, sir. All right, so I'm glad to see so many hands with knowledge of Configuration Manager 2012. It's going to save me a lot of time. I'm not going to go too deeply into this, but I know that there are some attendees here that aren't very familiar with it either. So I'm going to try to find a happy medium. Okay. So what we've got here is the Configuration Manager 2012 SP1 admin console opened up. I'm in the Assets and Compliance node. We click over here to Compliance Settings. You'll notice there's now a User Data and Profiles configuration item. This is new with Configuration Manager 2012 SP1. If we drill down a little further, you'll see that I've already got one here. But to create a new one, you just right-click on User Data and Profiles, create User Data and Profiles configuration item, and you get these three options, right? So you can you can monitor and control folder redirection, offline files behavior, and roaming user profiles using this new configuration item. I'm going to cancel this and show you the one that I've already done. Click the properties of that. On the folder redirection tab, you can see I'm enabling this for any device. The things I'm redirecting, I'm only going to redirect the desktop and the documents folders, right? Because that's all I really need for this. So you don't have to redirect everything. And if you're familiar with group policy and the folder redirection options there, this is probably looking very familiar to you. This is not to to give you domain admin rights to deploy GPOs. But what this does do is allow you to use one single management console to do some things that you might have had to ask the admin to do before to modify GPO for you. So here, these are all being directed back to this folder. On the offline files tab, you'll see I've selected this to enable offline files. And this is really important especially for UEV, so that the UEV agent can access offline files if they're disconnected from the network.
It's actually one of the dependencies of the UEV agent. We leverage offline files. So if you have a laptop and are roaming, those settings will continue to be maintained when you're off the network, and when you come back on, we'll actually put those back up the network, just like offline files does for folder redirection. So,
okay. And then on the roaming profiles tab, I'm not enabling that because, again, we don't need to do that. In this scenario, we don't want to slow down the logons.
Because we're using granular settings roaming with UEV. Love it.
All right. So that, you can see I've deployed it out already to all my users. So if you're familiar with the Configuration Manager client, I'm going to go ahead and open this up. Show you here on the Configurations tab, you'll see the folder redirection configuration item has already been deployed. It's already run on a schedule using the Configuration Manager client and showing that this machine here is compliant with that policy, with that configuration item. If we click on View Report, it'll tell you the results of the last time that this compliance was run. And if we look into the folder redirection share, you should see everyone who's logged in. Because remember, I deployed this to all my users, right? And so far, in my little lab setup here, these are all the users that have logged in. With the Configuration Manager client enabled, the configuration item is run, and it's redirected them. Those files that we want them to here. So here's the desktop, my documents folder for the administrator I'm logged in as now. It's kind of boring right now, but if I create something new on the desktop, it appears in the share, right? If I delete it, it is gone. So that's basically it in a nutshell. So folder redirection, offline files are enabled. This is all through Configuration Manager 2012. No need to modify GPO. So now we're set up for the next section.
Cool. So Art will be getting his data now, but some of the challenges we have is now that he's got that, how do we get this other stuff going? So this is where, remember, our scenario is all about getting Art the applications that he needs. So let's talk about how we need to sequence the applications so we can make this seamless for Art as he goes and gets his information. So first, quick introduction to AppV. We talked a little bit about some of these, but I'll just hit them again briefly. Virtual applications work as if they're locally installed. And you can do a number of different things with these because, one, we can actually put them in the virtual bubble, if you will, where they don't interact, or you can actually use connection groups and other technologies to register them locally and act just like a traditional application. It's up to you as you roll this out, and Jeff will talk a little bit about that as he goes. And the other one was no dedicated drive letter. If you're familiar with AppV 4.6, it had a Q drive, was hardwired in there, kind of confused users. That's gone away. We talked about this, connection groups, virtual applications can work together, so I can roll out virtual applications independently and then create literally a virtual relationship between them so they'll know to interact and share information. And then finally, the last one is powerful management. And this is where we go to optimize disk space, and this is actually a very cool thing. And then the new web console, that's part of that. If you're rolling out AppV 5.0 and you want to leverage that separately, you can do that and leverage the web console. So with that, back to you, Jeff.
All right, I'm back. So now I'm logged in as administrator on the client machine, which has the AppV sequencer installed on it. Before, when Tim was introducing AppV, we talked about there's an AppV server piece, which basically manages the AppV applications and the infrastructure. There's a sequencer, which is what creates the virtual applications, right? And then, of course, the AppV client, is what really does the heavy lifting to operate the virtual applications. In this scenario, we're integrating with Configuration Manager 2012, so we do not need the AppV servers at all, right? If you had a separate AppV infrastructure that you needed the server bits for, you could use that. It's fine. With Configuration Manager integration, you don't need that. What happens, we'll deploy this app. It'll go out. It'll wake up the AppV client and say, hey, they want you to start this application, right? But before we get to there, we need to sequence it. So I'm just going to do a very quick, easy demonstration because we have limited time here. So I'm not going to go into very deep detail on a really hard application, right? So I'm just going to walk you through the basic process of sequencing PowerPoint Viewer. Right?
Well, this is going to be the same basic principle. It's just a little more complex than the others. And there's some guidelines. One of the toughest applications out there is Office because of all the interactions, and there's a white paper on how to do that.
Yep. And I've also got a more complicated one I've already virtualized that we'll talk a little bit more about as well later on. But to start, we open up the AppV5 sequencer. We're going to select the option to just create a new virtual application package. In the default, so the default here is to create the package, and this is basically you just manually installing it, right? The sequencer is going to catch all the configurations. You could also use what's called a package accelerator, and this is, for lack of a better term, it's basically a cheat sheet, right? So someone else has gone through, they've sequenced this application, and at the end, they've saved a file, a package accelerator, which lets you, now if you have the source files to install the application, all you need is the package accelerator and the source files, and you can use the sequencer to create the package, right? For now, we're just going to create a standard package. So what this does now, the best practice for sequencing is to use a clean VM, right, with no extra services running, no applications installed that aren't normal for your network. So what the sequencer does is it checks at the beginning of the process to make sure that some things we think we've found are common issues with sequencing aren't going on right now, right? So in this case, it's found Windows Defender is active. So I will shut that down. Thing type. That's off. I'll refresh. So you can see it's actively checking, right? So it knows, yeah, you shut down Windows Defender, but you left the command prompt open, right? So I'll shut that down.
I really wish you'd fixed that before the demo, Jeff. I'm very disappointed. We actually did leave that in on purpose, just so you could learn.
Yep.
Question was, are there any plans to stop those services within the console? A lot of those, we don't want to provide that directly just because there may be other things going on. So I'll take the feedback back, but nothing near term that I'm aware of.
Yeah. And there may be some, for some reason, you may want some services running for some reason too, right? So. All right, so it's ready to begin, so I'll click Next. Okay, so here are the three options, right? So standard application is a standard application, right? You can create an add-on or plug-in. So these are things like you're deploying Office and you want to install the social connector add-in, right? Or you're deploying Excel and you want to install the Power Pivot add-in or something like that. Middleware, again, this is, .NET, these things that you need to, the applications need to run, right? They aren't technically part of the application. In this case, we're just doing a standard application. Select the installer. So this is just like you're installing this locally on the computer.
It does bring up a good point, though. What kind of computer do I want to use this on?
Right. So really the core thing, what operating system, right? It's really the lowest common denominator of your network is what we recommend. That's not a guarantee. It's going to work if I sequence this on Windows 7 and it runs on Windows 8, but chances are it will.
But one of the things you can do is use a VM, so you can always roll back. You want to use this on a very clean machine, and that way then you can guarantee that it's always writing down all the files versus a machine that's maybe had 200 things on there that it may not need to write a library on the installer and it would miss it.
Yep, good point. Click Next. I'm going to give this virtual application package a very interesting name, PowerPoint Viewer. All right, now the next section here we need to fill out is the primary virtual application directory. This is important because this is where the virtual application thinks the program's installed, right? So when this application runs on your system, it's actually using your system resources through the AppV client, and it's going to try to connect to things, right? So this is just kind of telling it this is where you're starting from. I'm going to stay close to the default, but not quite. I'm copying this because we're going to need this later.
That's experience right there.
Lots of copy and paste.
Can you use environment variables? You specify program files x86.
I wouldn't recommend that. Okay, moving on. So now this is just standard. This is what's going to happen now is the sequencer is just launching the app, right? It's just running setup, right? So this is going to be pretty standard setup.
So it's basically watching in the background for any changes that are going to come through, and that's what it's going to be monitoring.
Yep. This is the exciting part of the demo. Right. So what it's doing right now is, like Tim said, it's monitoring what's going on in the background. It's monitoring what files are being changed, what registries are being changed. Here's where I use my awesome demo pasting powers.
That was Control V, by the way, in case you missed it. That was pretty impressive. That's some strong kung fu up here.
I practice a lot of copy and paste.
And again, this is another reason why you want to use a VM, because you want to be able to do other stuff while it does it.
Yeah. And a lot of these, there's a couple messages on here about it taking a long time. Some applications really do take a long time. All right, but in this case, we're done. It's installed. So we check this box, I'm finished installing. Pretty self-explanatory, but this tells the sequencer you can stop watching what's going on now. Right? Whatever's happened has happened. That's what I care about.
Isn't that for reboots, though? Because I can reboot while I'm sequencing.
Right.
Isn't that true?
Right. If it'll reboot, and you can check the box, and it'll know when you deploy the application, it won't reboot. Okay, so now it's collecting all the changes.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons Art only needed the PowerPoint viewer.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise,
Art got expression blend a couple days ago. It took a little longer. All right, so now what it's done now is it say, hey, I watched what you did, I saw what you installed. Here are the programs I found that you might want to run, right? So here you give the option to run the program that you're probably going to use the most out of this application. In this case, there's only one. So I'm going to run it. And what this does is the sequencer is watching right now, right? It's watching what's happening. You're running these first use tasks, like these things that everybody's always going to do. Because what it's doing is it's putting all those bits into the feature block 1, which is the front part of the app B application, right? There's feature block 1, feature block 2. Feature block 1 is always there before it starts, right? So if you've got a very large application, people are always going to do certain things on, and you want those things to be fast, and you don't want them to wait for it to stream or something like that, you can run this task here, and it'll get that ready for you.
nice thing about that is for large applications, if you're streaming them from the network, that allows them to start up and then download in the background.
Yep. All right, so now we've got an installation report. No issues were found. That's good. I'm going to stop now because we're creating just a basic application package for the session here today. But if I wanted to customize it, say this application installs shortcuts on the desktop, I don't want them there, or vice versa, right? Or I want a shortcut somewhere else, or I want to change something about the default installation behavior, I could do that if we click Customize. But for now, we're just going to click Stop. And we're going to save the package. Notice the folder redirection is working down here. Default is to save your desktop. And I'll click Create. And again, this is a small application. It may take a minute or two because I'm on a VM with not very much RAM.
Any questions while this is loading real quick? Yeah.
Yeah, you have to upgrade them. There's a package converter app that you can use.
Okay. You don't have to resequence them. You run the converter, and it will do batch conversions as well, which is actually kind of nice. You point at the directory and then go through and run them.
Yep.
When you chose program file x86, that says to me that I have to make a different application package for it.
Yep. It's just a
question.
pointer. That is a good question. So the question was, when I chose program files x86, when you create those, do you have to have one for x86 and x64? Right? And no, not really. It's really kind of a variable, right? It's just for the application to know, hey, this is where I'm starting from.
So if I made one that's just a program file and then I tried to install it on a little bit, would it know, try to put that in x86?
Yep. Okay, so all right, it's done. So here we got this report. It's telling us files have been excluded from this package, which looks really scary, but it's not, right? So verify a package functionality, and I'll show you this report here. Close this, and we're done, right? So here's the virtual application package we've created from PowerPoint, MSI. Inside here, you'll see the appv package file. This is a .appv, so .appv file, right? appv 5.0 uses those project files. appv 4.6 below, they used an XML file, right? And I'll show you how that changes the integration with Configuration Manager coming up. There's also the MSI for standalone deployments for virtual applications. So this is new. These two deployment config files and user config files, this is new with appv 5.0. And what this lets you do is after you've created the virtual application package, you can customize it now, right? So if for example, I've got an application that accesses a database somewhere, and I go through and I sequence this app, and I come up with my package. Now I've got another group of users who access a different database of the same program. I don't have to resequence anything, right? I can just copy this, modify that config file, and that app will point to the different database and they run it. So here's the report we saw. You can check and see what it was talking about. Oops. Whoa, let's not use that. All right, so these are the files that were excluded, right? I don't think I've ever not seen that message when I've sequenced something, and maybe I have, but usually these are things that don't really affect the installation or operation of the application on a kind of a generic basis that aren't recreated on first use or something like that. So, but this is how you check. When we saw that message that files have been excluded, that's how you can check and see what's been excluded or what's been changed.
Okay.
And I think that is it. Oh. You could. Yep.
Repeat the question.
Do you still set the inclusions, exclusions in the sequencer when you sequence the apps? Yes. That part's still there.
Okay. Let's jump into the next session, which is deploying virtual applications in Config Manager 2012. Now, this is good stuff because what they've done is they've done some very good integration to make this. It eliminates dual infrastructures. So it allows you to use the infrastructure you've already laid out with CM 2012. You're not going to roll out the appv infrastructure. You're only going to use the appv client. So you'll still sequence, but you're not going to be using the appv backend. And this will give you the ability to manage both virtual and traditional applications in a single infrastructure. And that really becomes kind of neat, especially when you talk about things in CM 2012 about deployment types and how I want to roll this thing out. And I can actually look as it is primary machine. If it's primary machine, I may want to always say install the full device because I know it's a desktop or something like that. You can figure out different rules and methods that you want to roll out with CM 2012 that make that pretty powerful. And again, just talked about that one, the multiple application types. And then it gives you the flexibility of using appv virtual applications. This is the biggest thing. And then how you roll this thing out and how you manage the interactions, how you track them, that gives you real value in what you're trying to do on those devices. So I don't need to worry about as many of the interactions. I'm able to get it there very quickly. And again, use Configuration Manager to actually manage the delivery and do the things that it does very well. So with that, back to Jeff.
And we're back. Okay, so now we're back with Art. So Art's getting ready to go. He's got this assignment, his project he's working on. He's trying to use Visual Blend to create a nice fancy thing for us to take to our conference. We've sent him a source file in PowerPoint. And of course, when Art tries to open it, there's no file type associated with it, and it tries to go to the store, right? So luckily, when he calls us, we've got the answer for Art, right? So what we need to do now is go back to the server. So I'm logged in now as administrator on the server. Here's the virtual application package we just created, right? And through the magic of folder redirection, it's on my desktop already, right? We don't want to deploy it from there, right? So I'm going to take that and put it into my source directory where I keep all my goodies. All right, and just real quick, I'll show you, this is a Expression Studio. I'll show you how that's going to work in a minute, but this is the same, just another example, another virtual application package. You can see there's no extra files, same files you've already seen.
What about integration, like right-click integration, things like that? Is that
It is, and we're asking about the right-click context menu integration. We should save that for the end, I think.
But a great question.
It is a great question. Okay, so we're back in the console. Assets and compliance, I don't need to do that, right, because I'm going to deploy software, so I'm going to head over to the software library node. Within this node, you can do things like deploy operating systems, create driver packages, boot images, software updates. We can deploy software updates, right? But what we're after is application management, right? So I think most people in here are familiar with Configuration Manager 2012 and how their app model works on applications and deployment types. If not, don't fear. I'm going to go through that. So for now, if we click on the applications, I see Expression Studio is here. I see the AppV 5.0 client is already here. And I'm going to talk about those right after I create the application for what we just sequenced, right? So if we go in here, select the type of application. These are all the different types of applications that you can create in Configuration Manager. And this list seems like it's getting longer and longer and longer, which I think is a great thing. As we go through, you'll notice there's two options here for AppV. There's Application Virtualization 4, which covers 4.0 and beyond, up till 5, and then Microsoft Application Virtualization 5, which is for 5.0. And notice if you click for AppV4, click Browse, it's going to look for that manifest XML file. Can everybody see that? Maybe I should. Well, if you click on AppV5, it's looking for that .appv file, right? So that's one of the reasons why it's very important to make sure you've either used the converter or just deployed as an AppV4 app. No problems, right? The AppV 4.6 client and the AppV 5.0 client can coexist on the same device too, right? So if you're worried about as you roll these out, you haven't upgraded everything yet, it's okay. It'll still run. All right. So right now I'm going to go find PowerPoint Viewer, where we put it. There's the AppV file. So that was quick, right? So it's already just read all the information about the virtual application. Here's what it's found. Again, here are those 3 files, right? The other documentation files it doesn't import, but these are the 3 important files we need to deploy this app, right? We need the package file, the virtual application package file, and we need those 2 config files if it's been customized. And here, this is standard metadata, right? TechEd demo. You can create categories with Configuration Manager to help you manage them. All right, next. Pretty standard summary page. It's creating the application now based on the settings we've given it. Becoming another exciting part. Okay, there you go. And we're done. All right, so we'll take a quick look at this application we've just created. If I just right-click on it and hit Properties, you can see the wealth of metadata now that's associated with these applications. Right? All this is reportable, all this is queryable to help you manage it. So on the General Information tab, basically, just all the general stuff. Who has rights to it, what's the name of it, what categories is it in. Application catalog, this is another part of Configuration Manager that we're not going to cover in the demo today, but that's a way for users to go out and find applications they want to install. References, so nothing depends on this application to run. Distribution settings, it's just a normal app. I'm not going to worry about trying to rush it out there. Deployment types, this is where it gets interesting. I'm going to come right back to that. Content locations, this is where when we push these bits out to a server, to stream down, this is what it's looking for. Where do we want to put it, right? And then supersedence tab is used if another application is coming out that's newer than this, it'll supersede this application or vice versa, right? I can say, I'll use Adobe. If I deployed Adobe 10 and I deployed Adobe 10, I could virtualize Adobe 11, set supersedence on this, and Configuration Manager would uninstall the old and install the new one. But in this case, all we're doing is deploying PowerPoint Viewer. So we have one deployment type, and it's the AppV deployment type. Remember all those options we had of all the different types you could deploy? In this case, we're just deploying the app V. Here are the properties of that. You'll notice this is different from a standard MSI install. On the Content tab, here are those 3 files again. Publishing is an interesting tab. It's not very interesting on this deployment time. But any program that was found inside of that package will show up here, right? So you can selectively decide what do I want to show my users, right? If I deployed a whole suite of things and I only want to show them one part of it, I can choose that here. Requirements is no requirements. Dependencies, virtual environment. Now, we could deploy this right now, and it would work because I know I have the app V client already in all my demo machines. But in most enterprises, you're not really sure if the things are there, right, or all the dependencies are there. So what this tab does is it gives you the ability to say, hey, this virtual application isn't going to work without something, right? Everybody guess what it is? Yes. All right. So here we have to set the dependency for that, right? Here's all the available applications I have.
So if it doesn't find that, it'll actually deploy it to resolve that dependency.
It'll
That's one of the
automatically
cool things
install
about
it.
this.
It'll try to run and say, hey, you're missing a dependency. Hold on a second. And go install that first, and then install it. You'd be surprised how many people deploy virtual applications without the app V client.
Is there a question, sir?
So with 2012 and that coming together, you still have 2 agents to roll out.
So the question was, with 2012 and AppV coming together, do you still have 2 agents? And the answer is yes.
Yes.
So
If you're familiar with Configuration Manager 2007, they couldn't really coexist, right? Well, they coexisted, but if you enabled it, Configuration Manager took over from the app V client, right? 2012, Configuration Manager 2012 doesn't do that. It doesn't care where it came from, right? So what the integration piece now is, you still need the app V client because the app V client is what really does all the heavy lifting, right? The Configuration Manager client, through this integration, knows if it goes to that machine and it looks for the app V client. If I deploy this virtual application to it, and that Configuration Manager client kicks off the installation, the first thing it's going to do is look for the app V client and just say, here, this is your business, not mine. See you later, right? But we're not going to go clear out the cache. We're not going to do that stuff. So in theory, you could have multiple topologies. You could have app V server deploying to your clients and the Configuration Manager client or server deploying too, and that's okay. Speaking of deploying.
yeah, Art's still waiting for his app. Are we going to get that there?
He keeps calling me. My voicemail's full.
Yeah, I hate that.
Anybody have an Art? I used to have an Art when I was an admin every week.
Is there, if you force the refresh on the client, like if you want ours to have it right away, based on the settings on the client.
Yeah, it's really based on the client settings.
So if it's like in the
Repeat the question.
4.6, it was always at 30 minutes, it's like
The refresh, how do we speed up the refresh for the app to show up? Yeah, you can do a DC refresh, log off, log back on. For Configuration Manager, it's built on the client policy for the client. Right? I got it tuned down to like 3 minutes right now in here. There used to be an additional 2-minute delay. Does anybody remember that? Configuration Manager 2007? And they got rid of that. Right? So now once it gets a policy, it's ready to go. It just shows up. So it's a lot faster. It's not instant, but it's a lot faster.
There's not a lower, like it used to be a lower limit of 30 minutes with the refresh interval for app. Now the lower than 5, you can actually go.
I'm not 100%
Well,
sure.
you're not using any refresh. The question was, can you lower the refresh interval for AppV? There's nothing AppV's doing refresh interval at all right now, because that was with the AppV server.
Yeah.
So the AppV server is not in the picture right now. We're 100% on getting our little bundle of goods, the AppV package, down to that desktop via Config Manager. So we're totally dependent on Config Manager being the little semi-truck trailer driving us along, and then they'll unload us there and we'll run.
Yep. All right, so I'm going to use Configuration Manager here. We're going to deploy this application out. I'm going to send out to all systems. This is the distribution point, so this is where I'm going to stream that app from. So the first thing we need to do is tell it where to deposit the bits for clients to access. The deployment settings, I'm going to install it. You could uninstall it. This is a change too, right? Remember the older version of Configuration Manager, if you deleted the advertisement for a virtualized application, it took it off the machines, client machines, right? Configuration Manager 2012, you actually have to come in here and create an uninstall application deployment. And I'm going to make that required, so hopefully it does it quickly. I'm not going to set a schedule. I'm just going to say as soon as it's possible. Here's the Software Center notifications. We're not going to change any of these. These defaults are fine for us. Summary tab, make sure I didn't copy paste something wrong. Nope.
Looks right.
And we're done. So right now, if we go to the content status, you'll see PowerPoint Viewer is being pushed out to the distribution point right now. Okay. So while that's doing that, let me go back here and show you something that might be a little more interesting for deployment types. If we look at, again, and this is a standard MSI-based deployment, right? This is the AppV 5.0 client application that I made earlier. Catalog. Now this is interesting, right? So these are all the applications that reference this, right? So you saw earlier we set the dependency for the PowerPoint viewer to, hey, you make sure you have the AppV client. You can come in here and check and see what other packages or applications are dependent are referencing your application, right?
So in this instance, if you're looking a year or two down the road to upgrade to the next version of AppV, whatever it is, you could actually see how many clients you'd affect.
And again, the remainder of these tabs are standard settings. I only have that one deployment type. It's on my distribution point, and nothing is superseded. Now, if I go to Expression Studio, so this is the tool that Art uses. Open that up. Again, looks very similar. Very, very similar. No references, distribution settings. But this one has two deployment types. Right? So in this case, you can continue to add these. Depending on how your situation is, what your scenario is, you can have as many deployment types as you want. Right? And what happens is when you run this app on the client will check, right, and say, what dependencies do I need? Which deployment type fits my situation? Which one should I run? Right? So I don't have to create two applications. One's virtual to deploy, and one's a standard MSI to deploy. I just create one application, and I say, hey, I'm going to deploy this, but it's going to be one of these two ways, depending on what you find when you get there. Right? So in this case, we got the scripted installed, the MSI for Visual Studio. In the General tab, pretty standard. Content, it's out on my distribution point. It's coming from this location on my server. Here's my very complicated command line I used. Right? Detection method, this is so if the configuration manager client tries to run this application, it'll look and see if it's already there. Right? So what I've done here is I've used an MSI GUID to say, hey, if you find this MSI installed on the system, then stop, you're done. In user experience, I've installed when they're logged on. You can install, and most people do, whether or not they're logged on or not. So if you deploy applications at night, no one has to be there. No user interaction. Requirements tab. So this has got a new thing for us, right? So primary device. Primary device equals true. So what I'm saying is if I'm logged in on my primary computer, the one I use all the time, I'm going to get the MSI install. Right? It's always going to be, all the bits are on my box. They're always right there. See if you can add as many requirements as you feel you need to make this actually work for your situation as well. It doesn't have to just be primary device. So primary device is a user category thing. And we only have primary device equals true or false. Right? But this is the beauty of the application model of configuration manager. Right? So these are the requirements you're saying. If it's on a device, maybe I only want to deploy it to ones that have a certain amount of RAM, or they're in a certain Active Directory site, or configuration manager site, or the CPU speed is this, right, and on and on.
Depending on the application, they may not want to have the app physically installed for licensing reasons, so they'll only install that to a primary device physically and then use virtual for other ones because it's easy to remove.
Yep.
So there's a whole host of scenarios you can see with that.
And if none of those work for you, you can create your own. Right? And this could be registry keys, it could be files, it could be all kinds of stuff. Right? So it's very, very customizable. Yep.
Okay, so in this example here, you have two different deployment types. So what would have to happen for the priority 2 to actually install instead of 1?
It would just go down. All that priority really says is check them in this order. When the first one you find that works, use it. right? So the question was, well, how do we?
What wouldn't work though? Like say with the first the admin.
Sure.
You already put the client in as a dependency, so it would auto install the client.
The-
How might that fail?
So the question was, how do we change the priority, right? Or how do we make sure that one works and one doesn't work? Is that kind of something?
Well,
good
he's
to
saying
paraphrase?
in this specific scenario.
So in this specific scenario, what I've got here is, so there's two different versions, the MSI and the virtual, right? If I come in here, here's different tabs, same stuff we've already seen. Here's the publishing tab that's got all the different applications you could have. You can select, I don't want to show all these, or I want to show them all, right? I deploy with everything. When I get to the requirements tab, this one says requirement is false, right? This one says primary device is false. If this application runs and it starts going through those requirements list, and if the first one it hits says this needs to not be your primary device, it'll go to number 2. And number 2 says, hey, this is my primary device. I'm supposed to install here.
Yeah, I think that was the piece we missed. Was
Based on the requirements that you set up.
yeah.
Right.
So he's basically said the virtual application, it's got to be false for being a primary device, which means it's going to go down to the second priority item, which he has. If it is true, it'll run.
Yep. And so on and so on. If we had a whole list of them here, it would just keep going down to the found one that they qualified for, right? And then it would say, now I'm going to run, you don't have the AppB client, so here you go. And then I'm going to go on, right? So we've kind of skimmed over this concept of primary user, right? I don't know if everybody's familiar with that or not. This is a configuration manager feature. So let me show you how that works real quick. If we look in here to Expression Studio, I've deployed it out to this collection of users, right? Expression Studio users. If I click over here to Asset Compliance, and, when I restart my console,
Gives us a chance to refresh the demo.
yeah, it was mad at me for not copying and pasting again.
Yeah, it happens. It happens.
Okay, so back to user collections. Here's my Expression Studio users collection. It's got 3 whole people in it, right? Here we see art. And if we click on art, I can look over here and see primary device for related objects. If I click on that, it'll show me W801, which is our client for the demo, is his primary device, right? So the question I guess you're probably thinking is, how do we know that's his primary device, right? So there's 2 ways to do this. I'll show you both. The easiest or the hardest, depending on your opinion here, is you can manually do it. I wouldn't recommend this for thousands of users and thousands of computers, right? But you can right-click on it, edit primary users, right? And what this is going to show you, these are all the users that have ever logged in on this computer based on the security log event logs, right? I can come in here as administrator and say, I want Cindy to be a primary user of that computer, right? So that's administratively defined. I've said, maybe someone's brand new that just came in, this is your brand new computer, I'm going to set up for you once, and here you go, right? That's not really scalable, right? If you've got thousands of users, 1,000 computers, and they're refreshing, and they got a new computer, and they got to wait, right? So their other option is there's a user agent defined. And I'll show you how that works. That's actually using the configuration manager client to define who the primary users are for each device. And to configure that, you go to the administration node here, the client settings. I'll right-click on the default, hit properties. And down here at the bottom, user and device affinity, right? So these are the settings that run on the client. It'll check to see, hey, is this a primary user of this device or not, right? These are all configurable, based on, this person has used the computer so many minutes, right? Default's 2,880, right? Or they've used it for a certain number of days, right, concurrently. Or you can tell them to actually do their own, which is off by default, so they can define, hey, is this your primary device? They can say yes or no. For this to work, you just click this. Next time the client policy runs out, it'll start checking for that and automatically set it.
So is that on by default?
The question is that on by default? No, it's not. You just have to, this is part of the settings. And I think the beauty of this, actually, is you can create custom client settings, right? So you can create a whole slew of custom client settings, like I want this group of computers to behave one way, this group this way, this group of users this way, right? And so in this case, most of the defaults are turned off, right, to allow you to customize those per collection. In my case, I'm just updating the defaults. All right, so let's go see if Art can open up this. So now through the magic of the demo, I snap my fingers and hopefully I have a file type association.
It's there.
Hey, look at that. All right, so now if I click on this, Art can now open up the PowerPoint. Ta-da.
So what happened in the background is it went and pushed to the distribution point. The client actually pulled it off the distribution point, installed it. Art is able to do his thing.
Yep. It's registered with the AppV client. If we click refresh, you should now see one package is registered, and there it is. Right? So remember, this is Art's primary device. So he should have Expression Blend physically installed, right? And he does. So you see here, it's opening up now, but it is not registered with the AppV client, right? And that's all through that app model. I just said deployed out to these 3 users, any computer they're on, doesn't matter. If he's on this computer, he gets the MSI-based install, which he did. If he's on another one, which we will show you in just a few minutes, he'll get the virtual one.
Okay.
So now the question is, so Art's got his files, he's got his applications, but now he wants to be able to manage his settings across those devices, right?
So he's mostly happy.
Mostly.
But we want our end users to be delighted.
And he's still
delighted
still
with the
calling.
service we provide, right? So what we want to do is move to this next part, which is create and deploying virtual settings. And as we hit this part, we want to talk about the first part, which is generating and deploying these settings templates that we've talked about. It's going to be similar to what we kind of hit before, but the idea of this with user experience virtualization is it's personal and flexible. It means as you go around the enterprise, your logins are fast. It takes your identity and personalization from device to device, makes it really easy to use. Next one is simple and versatile. Templates define which applications are there. It doesn't bring everything. It doesn't take 20 minutes to log in. It allows you to go ahead and pick specific apps that you want to roam settings for or OS settings, and you have those. And it also gives you an ability to roll back if you need to roll back to a particular setting. But again, that's up to you in the environment. Integrated and scalable, easy to deploy and manage. Again, it's a client-only architecture. We don't leverage a server at all other than to have a storage share. We'll talk about that in this demo. And seamlessly integrates with products through these templates. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jeff, and we're cruising through this next part.
Okay, so I'm back as administrator. Art's called me again. So now I'm going to open up UEV generator. Now, as Tim said earlier, there's a lot of applications, a lot of Windows components, accessories that automatically have their settings tracked by the UEV agent. In this case, Visual Blend is not one of those. So we're going to create a custom settings template for the UEV agent to know where the custom settings are for this application, right?
Now, just real quick on this, one of the interesting things we said on AppV, on the sequencer, run it on a clean machine. This is actually just the opposite. You want to run it on a machine that's actually run applications and had a lot of settings there. Well, you have more success of capturing more uniqueness.
Okay, so we'll select this first option and create a location template. I think.
Click it harder.
Oh, copy paste. Oh, there you go. All right. So here, what we're doing, is just as Tim said, the sequencers for apps, the generators for settings, right? So we're going to go find this previously installed application. Go find the exe for it.
You can also just grab the shortcut on a desktop as well, which is nice.
There we go. Yep. So you can take the exe or just a link. I'm not going to do anything custom here with the command lines. So now the generator is running. We've told it what application to launch. It's looking at the system right now, kind of seeing how things are right now, and then it's going to start up the application and monitor it as it loads.
Now, one of the common questions we get when we've shown this, and you've just seen these back to back, gee, Tim, this looks a lot like sequencer. Can we build this all in one DIL? We've had that request. It's not there today, but I'll say we've taken the request. They are very different in what they're monitoring for and what they're watching, and there's very differences, but we've tried to make the UIs similar so you can, again, you see how they behave.
Okay. So what I've just done a couple settings changes there. Not really necessary. I just kind of do it because it makes me feel good, I guess.
Technically, the majority of application settings are captured when an app starts up and closes, but if there's something specific that you want to make sure is tracked, go and click and change that setting.
Yep. So now I'm exiting out of the app, and now it's checking, cataloging all the settings it's just found, right?
Yep.
Location is finished. Now it's going to show me what it found, right? So here's all these registry keys we think you're going to need. Here's some non-standard ones. I'm not going to worry about those right now. Here's some files that we found were in use just now. Again, non-standard again, we don't need.
And non-standard are defined by a list that we learned, like log files and things. You don't really care about those.
Don't need to edit the template at all. You could. Again, this is metadata. I'll create it. I'll put it in my favorite place to put things, my desktop. All right, we're done. So there's our template. It doesn't do us much good, though, there. Where we need it is on the server, because I've configured, oops.
You lost the one.
See, I should have copy-pasted. Oh, now I made it all mad.
We're done. There you go.
There. All right, so the UEV agent we've deployed is configured to look at this UEV catalog share for custom templates, right? And so I'm going to just put this in here.
All catalog is just a place that we can put those. The agent just monitors it once a day for changes to see if there's new templates it needs to apply.
Yep. By default, it's once a day. I think it's 3 a.m.
Yes.
I've tweaked this here, so it's 2 minutes, right? So we're going to talk about these other shares and how it works for about 2 minutes. Right?
Amazing how the content worked out like that.
Right? So if we look inside the template here, you'll see this is a very simple one. We didn't make many changes. This is kind of how it looks. If there are typos in here or something gets corrupted, you get this from somewhere else, you can use the generator to make sure it's valid before you deploy it, which we recommend.
Essentially, it's looking for registry entries and files. Those are the things that we capture settings in and roam those.
So this is kind of a quick demo of how it looks, right? So these are all the users that have logged in. The UEV agent has stored their settings in this settings share. If you don't want to use the settings share, you can store these in their home folders in Active Directory. For the demo, I thought it'd be interesting for you guys to see. So this is where it's being stored. So here are, actually I'm logging in as administrator. Administrator's settings, right? So you see a lot of Enter Explorer, I think it's 8, 9, and 10.
Yes.
WordPad, desktop settings, theme settings. Office.
Now, one of the things to note, too, is that settings package directory is a hidden directory, so you have to specifically do it. So if you are using Active Directory, home directory, the user doesn't see it to get in there and mess around.
Yep. I just changed a simple thing, right? I've changed calculator view. If I save that, it should show up, and there it is, right? So now, no matter where the administrator logs in, when calculator starts up, it's going to know I've got a setting over here. You want to see it in this view.
UEV operates on triggers, so as applications are open and closed, it looks for differences, captures those, and that roams between devices.
Yep. So now I'm going to sign out. There. We'll let Art log back in.
Remember, we want to delight Art. That's our goal.
Yes.
He called and thanked us for PowerPoint, but he'll be delighted with settings. That's one of the cool things about it is settings. People don't have. It's a wonderful thing if we can do that. To not have an app's painful, but to have settings, that's great.
It's amazing when it just works, right? So here we are. So Art's back again. We'll do the quick demo. Same thing for Art. We'll change calc. See it shows up. Now, here's where we cross our fingers. I've waited long enough before this demo started. All right, so now Art's opening up Visual Blend. This is what he uses. He's going to use this for his application. He wants to create an animation, so he changes this. It's easier on his eyes to use the expression light theme. So he changes those two things, closes it. Doesn't like that. Wants to go back and do it again. Right? Yeah, I think I may be rushing this a little bit. We'll change something else. Let's add something.
We can go run it manually if we have to.
I'll put it back to there. There it goes, right? So now we've changed that view. It's no longer the dark standard view, right? File. These are the settings that we've captured. There's a settings package file, which is, hey, here's a list of settings locations, right? And then we have these data files, package data files, that actually contain the settings we're tracking, right? So now, if I go log in on the server as Art,
Well, that's coming up. The cool thing is you can put this on a server for VDI, for remote session hosts, and
Doesn't
go ahead and
matter.
leverage it, just like Appy. Very cool.
and we open up Expression Blend. Notice this is the virtual application running now.
So we've gone from physical to virtual to another machine, and Art is delighted.
Art is happy.
Delighted.
Right? Art has no clue this is virtual. He has no idea how this thing's got there. It just works, right? And that's what he's after.
That's the other great thing is you'll notice the user wasn't interrupted. They were able to act in their normal flow. And go ahead. Am I ready?
That's it.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to the next one, which is finally enforcing the settings using Configuration Manager. So one of the things that happens is users go ahead and leverage the system. You need a way to control how the agent behaves in policy. UEV now has a Configuration Manager integration component with a config pack. It allows you to make sure you lock down that agent to be consistent across your enterprise. So if the user changes it, we actually use the Configuration Manager settings to roll that back and make sure it's enforced every time. Simple to get. It's a download on support or on Download Center at Microsoft. Makes it really easy to do. We've given you a link in the presentation that you can hit. And again, simple to deploy. If you've done a config pack before or a DCM, it's just like that. It plugs in, and Jeff's going to show you how easy it is.
All right. So now that Art's happy, we want to keep him happy, right? If something's going on with that UEV agent, and we want to make sure that it's set up the way we want it, right? We want to enforce this configuration. The way we do this with Configuration Manager, I'm back in the console here, Access Compliance Node, Configuration Baselines. I don't have anything there, right? So what do I need to do? I go out, I can create this myself, but it's much easier. We've already created one for you. You can create one, or you can get a vendor-supplied one, right? And so in this case, we've gone out to the Download Center. We've downloaded the UEV configuration pack, and we're just going to install it, which is a pretty simple standard installation process.
It's a little tight right now.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
Oh, there it goes.
Question?
The console.
Yeah.
So in Windows 8, if a user has turned on the sync that they can do with their live account, will UEV and the live account step on each other?
Today, UEV 1.0 doesn't synchronize Windows 8 apps. The only collision could possibly occur in desktop settings. So if you changed wallpaper, that's one of the things that can be synchronized with Windows 8 through Microsoft account. But we would be syncing the same thing. So it could potentially collide, but we haven't seen anything reported in the wild of customers having problems today. That is something we are looking at addressing in future releases, but that's the status today.
All right, so I've installed that. It's created this new config pack directory. And inside there, you'll see the UEV baseline cab file and also some documentation. So it's really easy. Just right-click on configuration baselines, import configuration data. We'll click Add. Now we'll browse to that cab file. That configuration manager is reading the description, getting the details. It'll pop up here in just a second and tell us what's found.
Just one comment on that on Windows 8. One of the things that's nice about UEV is it will actually take settings from Windows 7 to Windows 8 back and forth. Just another benefit.
Cool. So we found the UEV baseline here. Going forward, you see it's one baseline with one configuration item. Now we'll import it into the site. And we're done. Not quite. We have to deploy it, right? So let me just deploy this really quickly, and then we'll go back and talk through what it does, right? So right now I'm checking remediate non-compliant when found, right? So if it finds something, it's running a check, and it finds, hey, something's not the way it's supposed to be, it'll automatically fix it for us. I've got this to run every 2 minutes, which is about all we have left.
We've got 5.
Oh, okay. I'm going to deploy this to, let me deploy this to all systems. All right, so that's out. Again, this is doing the same thing we did with the PowerPoint viewer. It's out being staged on the distribution point right now. The client's going to pop up. It's going to run its configuration check every 2 minutes. And it's going to say, hey, there's a new one. All right, we'll have this done. So let's go look and see what it does. All right, so basically verifies your pair as a UEV agent, right? We check and see what it's evaluating. It's got one configuration item. We've deployed it out to all systems. It's going to check every 2 minutes. All right. Security tab, just basic security information for that object. If you right-click on the UAV baseline and say Show Members, or select Show Members, it'll show us all the configuration items associated with that. Go to the properties of that configuration item. You can really get down in the nitty-gritty details of what it's checking for, right? So these are the ones that come by default. Checking to see the max package size for the settings, right? Because if you get too many settings, that's pretty rare, I'd assume.
Very rare.
We can check on that.
The big one is setting storage path configured. That's one that the settings won't roam if it can't write to a central location, right? So that's the biggest one that you'll want to remediate.
Yep. Here we've got one, is the agent service running?
Yeah.
What verifies agent service is running? Compliance rules, it says, here's the name. Is it running? If it's not, turn it back on, right? So how do we know how to turn it back on? There's a script for that, right? So the remediation script that comes with this basically runs if the client fails that check, it'll run the script to remediate it and let us know.
Now, on these, on the one like setting storage path, you do need to edit the script to put in the correct setting storage path. Otherwise, it'll just report that the script is broken and it can't fix it. So just be aware of some of those things. And we put that in the documentation, so you have that.
Are there pre-canned baselines for app V as well?
The question was, are there pre-canned baselines for AppV? Jeff?
Not that I'm aware of or can talk about publicly. Right? Refresh, come on. All right, so I'm talking too fast now. So this is gonna work just like the last one did, right? So this configuration item has been deployed out. The same configuration manager client process is going to run, which it's all gotten into the system. There it is, right on cue. All right, so it's the downloading documents, right? So I'm going to manually kick off this evaluation process. While it's doing that, I'm going to sneak off over here and open up
Be fast.
something I forgot to do, yeah. All right. Right, so it's compliant. Now, if I come in here, and one of the checks, remember, we set to remediate was if this service is stopped, let's restart it, right? So I'm going to come in here and manually stop it. This could be, in the real world, this could be based on anything that's happened to accidentally stop that. Kick off the reevaluation. So now you can see it's downloading documents, right? So just that quick, it's like, hey, something's wrong, and it's probably downloading that script, right?
And then it'll remediate it and report compliant.
Yep.
There you go.
There you go. Compliant, done. If you review the report, we can see that it made that check. It found one that failed, and this is what it did to fix it. Right?
Don't you love reports like that? I found a problem, and oh, by the way, I fixed it.
I fixed it for you. Yeah.
I love that stuff.
All right, so there you go.
I wish my kids could do that. Anyhow. Okay. We've got about 1 minute, so I'll do a quick wrap-up, and then we're going to have to take questions offline, and I apologize. We wanted to get a lot of content in. When we did this demo, we knew it was important to show the soup to nuts kind of demo, so I appreciate your patience with that. But just in retrospect, quick summary, we were able to configure the client quickly, we were able to create and deploy virtual applications, and we were able to deploy the settings. Now, what's really neat about that is our outcome. Our friend Art, he wasn't very happy at the start, but now he's able to access his applications on any device and anywhere on the network. The admin, he preserved the deployment agility and control to provide a delighting experience, if you will. Now, what are the outcome and results? Well, 1, you have a happy customer. You have to love that. 2, you reduced your costs. And number 3, most important, there's possible promotions for both Art and the admin. So
Everybody's
you have to feel
happy.
really good about that. So with that, thank you for your time today. You can read the takeaways and that, but we appreciate your time. Please leave the surveys at the door. Please fill the online surveys out. Again, if you want other information on this, we're in the lab. We also have these other sessions. Some of them have already occurred, but at least you'll have where they are. And then again, Windows Track resources and other things are part of the deck as well. Thank you very much. Have a great day.